This episode is sponsored by Dr. Chrono by EverHealth, the #1 mobile all-in-one EHR. Built specifically for medical practices, Dr. Chrono includes an integrated feature that powers a seamless payments acceptance experience. Dr. Chrono Payments offers multiple ways for patients to pay as well as insurance credit card processing. As a Dr. Chrono customer, you can easily activate our fully integrated payment solution that will streamline your cash flow and help you get paid anytime from anywhere. Deliver the best patient experience with a fast and easy way to collect payments. Visit drchrono.com/payments. That's drchrono.com/payments to learn more about Dr. Chrono today. Direct primary care is an innovative, alternative path to insurance-driven healthcare. Typically, a patient pays their doctor a low monthly membership and, in return, builds a lasting relationship with their doctor and has their doctor available at their fingertips. Welcome to the My DPC Story Podcast, where each week you will hear the ever-so-relatable stories shared by physicians who have chosen to practice medicine in their individual communities through the direct primary care model. I'm your host, Marielle Concepcion, family physician, DPC owner, and former fee-for-service doctor. I hope you enjoy today's episode and come away feeling inspired about the future of patient care, direct primary care.
Direct primary care is literally saving my career in medicine. I was depressed, burned out, and fed up with being a data miner. I was a shell of a physician before DPC. And what's scary is I wasn't that far out from residency. Looking back, it feels like I was an imposter, pretending to be a doctor, but not really operating the way we all thought it would be when we were studying to become one. I was literally contemplating leaving medicine altogether, and if I didn't have student loans, I probably would have. DPC saved my career, and now I'm operating in the full capacity I was meant to as a physician. Now that I'm out of the muck, my purpose in life has never been more clear, and DPC makes fulfilling my purpose possible and easy. I'm Dr. Jamie Eller of Healthy Self DPC, and this is my DPC story.
Dr. Jamie Eller practiced as an ICU, home health, and wound care registered nurse in Texas for 5 years prior to attending medical school. She graduated in the top 10% of her class from Nova Southeastern University College of Osteopathic Medicine in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, where she also completed an anatomy fellowship and a predoctoral teaching fellowship in osteopathic principles and philosophy. Dr. Jamie chose to specialize in family medicine because she values providing comprehensive care, building a relationship with her patients, and providing care for the whole family, from newborns to grandparents. She completed her training with the Conroe Medical Education Foundation in affiliation with the Lone Star Family Health Center. She received her family medicine board certification in 2020. Beyond standard family medicine, Dr. Jamie's medical interests include providing osteopathic manipulation, preventative lifestyle and hormone education, and natural alternative options to prescription pharmaceuticals when applicable. She also dedicates time to teaching osteopathic manipulation medicine to medical students at Sam Houston State University College of Osteopathic Medicine. When not practicing or teaching, Dr. Jamie enjoys spending time with her husband, family, and church. Her hobbies include working out and cooking with her husband, guest speaking for the Love of Hormones podcast, and caring for her many farm animals. Welcome to the podcast, Dr. Eller.
Thank you for having me.
This is such a treat. I know that you are a My DPC Story listener, and so I think it's so exciting when somebody has listened, but also now gets to have the microphone and share their story. In your case, you have such a unique story, and I want to start off with your before DPC life. And that was a journey that started in medicine for you was nursing, not necessarily medical school. And so can you tell us about when you graduated from nursing in 2007, you were doing nursing for 5 years prior to becoming a doctor. So what was life like, and what sorts of nursing roles did you take in your career prior to being a physician?
Yeah, life was so different back then. I had a lot more free time as a nurse. So my first job, I got my RN when I was 20. I did an accelerated nursing program. So I got my first job at UTMB in Galveston in the surgical ICU. And it was weird times because I was pushing morphine, but I couldn't drink yet. So it was very weird. But that was my first experience with doctors, really, working with the residents there on a regular basis. And it's actually probably what subconsciously inspired me to eventually pursue medicine. I had a lot of wound care experience in the ICU, and that is what set me up for pursuing wound care as a nurse. So when I decided after a year of nursing, I knew I wanted to do more. I wasn't satisfied with just doing the tasks. I wanted to know more of the why we were doing them because you don't get a whole lot of that in nursing school. And I just wanted to be able to do more and just know more. And so I made a decision after that first year of nursing to go back to school and pursue medicine, which was going to be a very long road because I only had my associates in nursing and just the basic credits for that. So I took a job doing home health, and I was a home health nurse full time in Galveston and went to school full time while I got those prereqs that we all love to get and studied for the MCAT and all that. And I applied my first year. I didn't get to apply to very many schools because I did not have a bachelor degree. I moved from Missouri, where I did nursing school, to South Texas, and they did not recognize the accreditation system that I came from. So rather than repeat those 2 years, I said, God's going to find a way. I'll figure it out. And so I did a lot of research, and I found that there's probably at least 20 schools in the U.S. that don't require a bachelor degree. So I just applied to all of those schools. I got waitlisted a lot to my first year, and didn't get in. But I retook the MCAT, got a better score, and took a wound care job for a year. And it's just funny how things work out because being off of that 1 year, not getting into school and doing wound care that whole year, it really set me up as a family doctor. I'm like so grateful for that experience. But needless to say, I got in my second year of applying to medical school after I learned about osteopathic schools, and I applied to those schools.
Did you find that those programs that were not requiring a bachelor's were more osteopathic or more allopathic leaning?
They were definitely more osteopathic leaning. There were probably about, let's say I did about 15 interviews, maybe 5 of them were allopathic, the rest were osteopathic.
Gotcha. Nevertheless, though, it's so inspiring that you started off like we all do. Like we all have different majors. We've had chemistry majors, chemical engineering majors, all these different types of majors, and we've all found our way to DPC. So I really love also though that it like you said, it set you up for family medicine and primary care when you're dealing with the whole person in their home, like how they live, what their habits are, what their care has been, what access you're bringing. It totally speaks to what you're doing now as a DPC physician. So let me ask you there, just because this is something that in 2024, you can be like in the state of California, for example, a non-physician provider that basically is a physician in the eyes of patients as long as you have so many hours. So for you, I want to ask about what was driving you in that first year when you were like, I really want to know not only why we're doing stuff, but I want to do more. What was it that drove you to be a physician versus a non-physician provider?
Yes, that's a great question, and I knew you would ask me. So, my age, I knew I was going to go back and do a lot of school, either way, whether I wanted to pursue a nurse practitioner degree or not. So I just figured part of me was like, I might as well just shoot for the stars and become a doctor. And if I can't, then I can always go to nurse practitioner school. And what inspired me to think that I could do that was my experience with working with residents. And I finally, at one point, turned 21, and I get to hang out with medical students and residents on the weekends. And you realize they're just regular people. And I'm like, well, if these clowns can do it, I can do it. So that really helped me get the inspiration that, yes, this was an attainable thing that I could do. And I was like, well, we'll just see where it goes.
I love it. And for those people who are also like me, like envisioning the Oktoberfest and hayrack rides and all the things that we did in medical school, it's like, oh yeah, we're totally normal people. Love that. So let me ask you, when you were speaking about how you were just primed for primary care, especially family medicine, in terms of the relationships that you got to build? In ICU, it's very different because it's acute settings. It's a lot of crisis situations or preventing crisis or trying to get out of crisis. But in terms of the experience that you had, especially doing those home visits, how did you go into some person's home and develop a relationship with them, especially when you were dealing with potentially chronic issues like wounds? Usually we think about chronically affected wounds, but because it's very different thinking in that home setting versus even an outpatient clinic, because you see someone maybe once, twice a year versus, and that's when they come to you and they wait in your waiting room, but a home visit is different. So I want to ask that as well.
Yeah, it's really weird to just show up in somebody's house and walk in and almost make yourself at home, if you will. I think probably the biggest thing that helped me out with that was my experience being a military brat and moving a lot and just having to remake friends and stuff all the time. And the environment would change a lot. And so I think one of my little special skills I developed growing up was just finding a way to connect to people, like finding a commonality quickly and then building off of that. So it would just be noting a picture on the wall and being like, oh, you like to fish? My dad's a fisherman. What kind of fishing do you do? Just easy things like that, and finding some commonality that really helps open the door to the patients being willing to divulge other information.
Stay with us. We'll be right back. Thank you to Spruce Health for supporting the My DPC Story podcast. The ways we communicate have changed dramatically over the past decades, but technology and tools in healthcare have not kept pace. Patients want more access and digital convenience, as well as the ability to text their care teams. Care teams are inundated with more communication and rising expectations, but are still using tools and technology stuck in prior decades. Spruce Health created a solution for the tech-forward DPC practice by creating a communication product designed to serve both the patient and the doctor through intuitive HIPAA-compliant workflows, tagging, scheduled messages, and triage templates ready for use, whether you're on your phone or in the exam room. New users get 20% off for the first 12 months of a paid plan with code MARYAL20. That's MARYAL20. So check out Spruce Health today at sprucehealth.com or check out the link in the show notes. I love that. And something that I do still, like even almost 10 years out of residency, is whenever I get emails about, oh, sign up to do an OSCE for, it was obesity medicine this week. And I'm like, oh, I still feel the like rush of, oh my God, I'm going to enter the door. I got to wash my hands. Hello, my name is introduced. But I think that what I got out of that was the reminder that like, when and if a person is so nervous about the education, the facts, the knowing solid, the facts that we have, it's know also that you have a personality behind your MD or DO. And that will really always help you, whether you're doing home visits or not, but especially in DPC, because we have the time to be more personal, I feel, with our patients without being rushed. That is something to just know that if you are nervous about opening a business or fearing DPC for one reason or the other, one thing to always remember is you still have you going into this. So just random note, but I wanted to make sure that I said that. So you achieved so much in your medical school. You were at the top 10% of your class during graduation. Like was mentioned in your bio, you not only completed an anatomy fellowship, which is so perfect for being an osteopath, but also you did your pre-doctoral teaching fellowship in osteopathic principles and philosophy. So can you just give us a little bit about what does that mean to be an anatomy fellow, and what does it mean to be an osteopathic principle and philosophy teaching fellow?
Yeah, so I mean, a lot of schools have these type of fellowships, but they might be different school to school. At Nova Southeastern University, where I went, the anatomy fellowship was that whole summer that you get between first and second year, where you used to go take vacation. I spent that all in the anatomy lab, and we dissected cadavers. And during the summer was when all the PT, OT, anesthesia assistants, all of these and the nursing students, they would all come and learn anatomy during the summer. And us anatomy fellows were in charge of teaching them anatomy from the cadavers and testing them and all that. So that was my first little stint in teaching somebody else. And then the OPP predoctoral fellowship, that was an extra year of education. So I went to a private medical school like many other osteopaths, and tuition was hard, especially then 12 years ago. I tell my students now, trust me, it was not any better 12 years ago when I was a student. But if you did this fellowship, there was 6 spots at our school out of 250 people who could potentially have it. And so you had to apply for it, and you're basically putting off your 3rd and 4th year rotation for a year in exchange for helping teach in the OMM courses. Your 3rd and 4th year tuition were free. So it was a huge incentive. It was probably the best decision I made as an osteopathic physician. We taught the 1st and 2nd year classes. So that was twice a week teaching. And then if we weren't there, we were in our OMM clinic doing patient care directly, and also rotating with other specialists like PM&R doctors and orthopedic surgeons. So it was I got to take a whole year and just focus on being an osteopathic physician that does manipulation. And it has set me up for success ever since.
It's totally taking the see one, do one, teach one to a steroid level. Like, that's amazing because you still teach today. So I think that that's really important for people to hear, especially if they're like, whoa, I totally could benefit from also the financial incentives there, as well as being super confident in doing OMM, especially going into DPC. After graduating medical school, because you had this amazingly strong background and foundation to build on, you went to residency. And so in residency, can you tell us about how was your experience there being in a fee-for-service environment that's just given just because that's how residencies are? Did you find that you were able to be doing OMM as part of your clinic? Did you find that it was difficult to do OMM because of the time restraints that fee-for-service had?
Yeah, so my residency was very supportive, not only of like my passions, but if you wanted to pursue rural medicine, they created a rural track. If you wanted to be doing OB-GYN stuff and delivering babies, they made a track for it. So I definitely wanted to keep up with the OMM. When I was interviewing there, they had an OMM clinic, and they were dual accredited for allopath and the DO side. But when I showed up, they had dropped the osteopathic recognition. So I was like, oh no. But they still had some DOs that were attendings that still did the OMM clinic that they fought for and allowed. And then I was able to continue that. I was limited to 30 minutes per patient, which you can still do a decent amount with that. And then I had to make sure I had a DO attending so I could at least bill for that. And as long as that was going on, I still got to do that once a week.
Gotcha. As you continued on in residency, did you find that you were looking towards a particular post-residency career? Were you looking for private practice options? Were you looking to do your own clinic? And how early on in residency did you start thinking about career after residency?
Yeah, that's a great question. So it was all a blur, but I started looking in 2nd year, and our program did a great job. They would bring back past graduates to come and talk to us. We had one that was doing DPC here in Texas, and a friend of mine that was 2 years ahead of me, she had graduated and opened up her own DPC. And so I was aware of it, but I still didn't know enough of it. And it just felt too intimidating. The whole, like, I don't know business, I can't do this. So eventually I just happened to be talking to a friend, and they were mentioning they talked to a recruiter who was recruiting for Sam Houston's College of Osteopathic Medicine in Conroe. I'm like, wait, there's a medical school in Conroe? Are you literally in my backyard? I always wanted to teach OMM, but I did not want, I'm a country girl. I did not want to move to a big city and to pursue academics. I just knew that's not what I wanted to do. So I didn't know what I wanted to do. I just didn't want to move to a big city. And so they were hiring, and the OMM department was hiring. It was literally the same exit that I was been taking for the last 3 years. I wasn't going to go very far. And so I actually got hired there during my second year of residency. And so they were waiting for me to finish up to come teach. So it was nice to just in the middle of residency to be like, I'm good. I have a job and I know exactly how much I'm going to make. And it was COVID times by then, so it was just things were crazy, but I had that security of knowing where I was going to go.
It's definitely nice. My husband and I, we only looked for job shares when we left residency, but the same thing, like we pretty much knew where we were going to go. And that was really, I do see why people continue. Like in California, the California Academy of Family Practice was saying on one of their stat sheets that like 86 to 90% of residents go into employed medicine. And it's clearly that's a financial, the financial outlook on life is a really big impactor of that in terms of loan repayment, or here's your 7-year mortgage on a house or whatever. It's, oh, coming from $50,000 a year to I have a house now with a 7-year mortgage. It's clearly there's incentives there, just like your incentives for being as appealing as they were between your first and second and third and fourth year of medical school. But I will say here that like people like Dr. Julie Gunther have talked about, could we make a DPC residency? That would be amazing. So just putting that out there for people to buzz in their own communities to see if that could get more voice behind it. So anyways, but when you went from residency, knowing that you're going to have this job, and then you were able to just start right away, how was that in terms of, did you have an idea as to like how much of your practice you wanted to be OMM related, how much of your practice you wanted to be family medicine related, and were you able to achieve that goal of how to craft your practice? Stay with us. We'll be right back. Have you tried an AI scribe in your clinic? Well, I've tried so many, and I can say Heidi Health is the best AI scribe I have come across thus far. With Heidi Health, I can create unlimited, customizable templates for my notes to help me truly cut down on the time I'm spending charting. Template for pediatric well-child check? Done. Template for weight loss management? Done. Some of my favorite things I've built into my AI template, beyond the general soap note, are having a list of actionables for our team to take after a patient visit, having the diagnoses listed, and creating an after-visit summary for our patients. Not only have I found Heidi Health to be the most helpful, customizable AI scribe so far, it's also more affordable than most out there. So try Heidi Health today and see how you can harness the power of an AI scribe for your practice. To get an entire month of Heidi Pro free, go to the homepage of mydpcstory.com and click on the Heidi Health ad.
Yeah, so I definitely went in with expectations of being at least 50% family and 50 or 40, 60, but somewhere close to that of family and OMT. When I first got there, it was in the department, it was just me and my boss for the whole department. And it was like that for almost 2 years, just me and her. So yeah, so there's 4 courses in fall, spring, and first and second year. So she had started the first semester in the fall and was building it out as she went. And I had the privilege of building out the second year. So it was literally like building curriculum and then the next week printing it and presenting it for a year and a half. It was really like 3 or 4 people's jobs, and I took on the work of 2 to 3 people, I say, for a year and a half. So with that, the clinic side of that, they wanted me in clinic 2 days a week to start with, but I actually had to fight to only have 1 day and eventually only half a day because the workload of carrying the entire course on your back was just too much. It wasn't like it was built and you can just go out there and present it. Like I was building it and presenting it. So eventually it got down to I was really only in a half a day, maybe a full day every now and then of clinic. And the majority ended up just being OMM, which I found ironic being surrounded by DOs who like to say they do manipulation, but when it came down to it, they were sending me their patients. And so I was becoming the OMM specialist, and I had to fight to have family family medicine patients. And a year and a half had gone by, and I still hadn't seen a single kid. And that I did not like. I went to a very tough residency, and I delivered hundreds of babies. I took care of kids, and I really wanted to keep that up. I worked hard for that. And so one of the answers I got when I asked about this was, well, the pediatricians have to get all the patients for now. And there wasn't any timeline of when they would switch over. And it's been a year and a half, and they still haven't switched over. My family medicine friends that are still there still say they don't get kids. So when I heard that, and there was other things too with how things ran in that clinic. I had no control. Even when I brought solutions that were totally easy and free to do, I couldn't operate in there anymore. I had to get out.
It's so frustrating. And I definitely would encourage people, if they're looking into employed positions, to ask the doctors who are there, especially if they're in your specialty, like if your primary care and your specialty is family medicine, ask what is your panel comprised of? Because there's definitely places like, this is why I only looked rural myself for a post-residency job, was because in the city, it's like family medicine only does adults between 18 and 65. Like, you don't necessarily see geriatrics, you don't necessarily see kids, you definitely don't see pregnant women. And if you want to do any procedure, there's no time for that. You refer out for a shave biopsy or things that we were totally trained to do in residency. And it kills me that there are still medical students and residents out there who aren't aware that like your full scope unopposed family medicine practice is not what you're going to see in a family medicine employed position after residency. So I think it's really important for people to hear those words, especially. Now, how did you decide? What happened where you were like, okay, I have done this. It was great. Financially, I had a guaranteed job, but man, like I'm a family doctor. I want to see people of all ages. I want to see people with all sorts of things that are not just OMM related. What pushed you to leave that position and go into the DPC space?
Yeah, so many things from the clinic side and then just the academic side itself. I stayed longer than I wanted to, only because the school asked me to stay because they needed me so that they could have accreditation. If I left, they would lose it. So I couldn't do that to the students. And so I stayed longer, probably 6 months longer than I wanted to. But when you get to the point where you pull up to work and you start crying before you get out, and your husband had it with you, we were only married a year and a half at this point, and he's fed up with me being on my computer literally all the time because I was busting out PowerPoints all the time. So that was when he had enough, and he was mad at me all the time. I was like, I can't. Like, as soon as the moment I could leave that school, or they were safe and they had got somebody else in, I threw up my two fingers. I said, peace. And I had my out, and the out had occurred 6 months prior. And it was a conversation with a friend who had her own direct primary care practice, and she was probably on her third year by then. And she had mentioned that she was thinking about hiring a nurse practitioner to come in. And I said, no, you're going to hire me. I was like, I'm done. I can't do this anymore. I had no idea you were ready to take on somebody else. Like, I want to do this. I am ready to do DPC. I want to learn it. I can't do anything else anymore.
When you mentioned how you're still taking the same exit for your job as you were your residency, and you like being more rural than urban, in terms of where you were practicing at Sam Houston in relation to Conroe, in relation to this DPC, can you give us a geographic, like, how far is one from the other? And was there any issue with you doing DPC directly out of this job at Sam Houston?
Yeah, so the DPC job was literally 3 exits up. It's a 10-minute drive. And I made sure when I went into academics that there was no non-compete, none of that stuff, because I was like, I'm not going to sign anything. And the same thing with joining this DPC practice. I was like, my husband's from here. We're not going anywhere. So we can't, like, that was a red flag, no deal. So it was nice. The DPC practice was 10 minutes from the school, which was convenient because I still continue to teach as a community faculty to support the department.
And given that you were in the area geographically, when you opened under DPC, even though it was in another person's practice that they had opened, how did you find patients? Did they find you because they knew Dr. Eller and they're like, where are you going to go?
Yeah, so I definitely had patients that had followed me from residency to SAM, and they're like, well, you have to tell us where you're going. And so, yeah, and a lot of those were OMM patients that I saw for a while. And then she already had a wait list, so a few people came from that, but it really just kind of came organically. It's the people that heard about me from so and so who came, and then next thing you know, their whole family's on board and they're telling their friends, and that was the number one growth factor for me.
During your time, because you were there, you were from, I believe, February 22 to November of 23 was the time between when you joined DPC and opened your own practice. Did you ever reach a plateau where you're like, hey, I got to employ a strategy of marketing other than word of mouth?
No, I mean, I could have used that early on, but I was still teaching at the school, so that was good income there. And only one person, I can only onboard so many people. So there was definitely a few months where it's just like nonstop, new patient, new patient, new patient. And then there'd be the natural little catch your breath, which I welcomed because I was still working at the school. And then my friend, she finally has a partner and she could finally take vacation. So she was taking vacations and she had a full panel. So it's kind of hard to bring on new patients when you're already managing half a panel and another full panel.
Totally, totally. When you decided to open your own DPC and now your clinic is in Willits, first off, how far is Willits from Conroe?
It's like 10 minutes north.
Yeah,
So
love this. And
there's 10 minutes from everywhere.
yeah, I love hearing this because I mean, I remember Dr. Pete Cascio was saying like he's on one side of the freeway because if you're on the other side, it's like you will be in LA traffic. And I just remember driving in Houston, like the roads are insanely huge and it's like you could just drive and drive and drive and then, oh, we're finally there. But so I love that you're just within this reasonable driving distance. Now, in terms of Willits, what is the community like? Is it more rural farming? Is it people who are blue collar workers and office jobs? What is your community like?
Honestly, I can't even be accurate right now. When I first moved here 7 years ago, it was very rural, very small town, which I love because I came from population like 3,000. And that's pretty much like what it was like here when I moved. Woods everywhere. We had one grocery store. And now, since the pandemic and everything, and there's been a mass exodus from other states, a lot of people are coming here. And Conroe and the Willis area have been the number one growing city in the country for, I think, the second year in a row now. So everybody's just coming here. So all of my beautiful trees are cut down and been replaced by homes, which I do not like. But now that I'm a small business owner, I'm like, okay, it's okay. Those are potential new patients. It's going to be okay. But I mean, as far as the socioeconomics, it's really diverse. We live really close to the lake, so you have your more affluent people, which their lake homes. We definitely have a lot of blue collar workers too. There's a lot of people also in healthcare that travel from this area down to Houston and the Woodlands Medical Center. So it's a really diverse population overall.
And as you were opening in Willits, in particular, 2023, people are moving in from all sorts of socioeconomic backgrounds, like you're saying, in terms of like you opened with 66 patients, if I'm correct there, which is a lot. That's amazing. I'm sure people are like, oh, I'm so jealous. But that is a lot. And that's I'm assuming those are also from that population who'd followed you from residency to your DPC to now your own DPC.
Yes, those were people I've already worked hard for and recruited for. When I gave my notice with the other practice, I think I was at 122 patients. And when I opened that first day, I had 66 that had already signed up. And within, say, a 2-month period, I had 88 of my previous patients. And then on top of that, new ones that had signed up then too.
And how did that process go? Because clearly you don't need to explain who Dr. Eller is to the people who followed you. And that's awesome that just within a short amount of time, more people were like, all right, we can't do this. Like I had patients like that. They're like, oh, we tried not going to your husband and then it's terrible. Like we need Dr. Philo back. We need Dr. C back. So I know that there's people who have experienced that, like the little trickle in of patients. But for you, because you've DIY'd everything. Like you've DIY'd your website, your marketing for your practice now. How did you approach it in terms of, hey, Healthy Self DPC is here. I'm here now in Willits. How did you expand upon your growth beyond the word of mouth praises that your patients were giving you around the community?
Yeah. So, I mean, the first, I think, 3 months or 4 months, I had no enrollment for any of my previous patients. And once I felt like I got all that I was going to get from that, I took that away. But then from there, I really haven't marketed, honestly. One of my biggest things that helps get word out is doing the OMM, because there's really nobody. I think I'm literally the only person between downtown Houston and downtown Austin that does manipulation at this level. So that sells itself. So I remain open to doing that for non-members, but at a much higher price. And then my members get a very discounted price for it. But I charge for it no matter what, because it is time consuming and it is a special skill that I worked hard to develop. But other than that, I mean, I'm on a few Facebook forums with a few pages for crunchies, woodlands moms, and things like that. I kind of cater to that population. And then church has been a really big outlet for me. They've seen me grow, and I had an open house when I finally got done, and invited pastors and friends from there just to come see and be like, look, I'm a real doctor now. And so that they could actually see it. And then they're like, oh, wow, like she has a clinic. Like suddenly when I have my own clinic, they're like, she is a real doctor.
It's so
So
special. It's so
yeah.
special, but it's especially the community that is familiar with you thinking how you're like, oh, you're an adult now. It's like, yeah, like, it's like I'm married. I'm like a real adult. Like I do things like have a job, and I created a job for myself. I'm laughing so hard because it's very much that journey that we go through. I especially feel with our parents who are like, yeah, okay, that's fine that you have an MD, but I'm going to Dr. Google my symptoms because you're just like, you're my kid. So I'm so glad that your community has been so supportive. Now, when it comes to things for marketing, I just want to point out two things, especially like you have on your website a screenshot of a Starbucks order. I'm like, I know what that is. And also you had a calendar that was just like, how long are you waiting for your appointment? And so can you talk to us about the use of those graphics in particular, and how those graphics have landed with your community in terms of have people mentioned those in meet and greets and such?
Yeah, that's a great question. Nobody's actually mentioned them, but I followed another podcast, like Business Made Simple, and they have amazing marketing strategies, and they even broke it down like how should you present your website, what are businesses doing wrong, and so the video came from that, which makes sense. Like everybody wants they want to watch something, they rather watch than listen or read. And so I put that video together on Canva and put it on my website. And then for me, I'm like, I don't even drink Starbucks anymore, but I still put everything in the concept of how many Starbucks drinks would that be. And so I'm like, look, I am worth more than a freaking Starbucks, okay? So, and I'm charging for less than a cost of a Starbucks drink. And I feel like that's something, again, it comes down to that relatability, that what can a lot of people grasp, and a lot of people drink coffee and know the price of coffee.
Oh my gosh. I'm laughing because I like, where, just a random question, where in relation to your house is the nearest Starbucks?
Not far enough. No.
Mine's 30 minutes. So
Oh,
I like,
wow.
that is it's Target and other things that I would love
It's
to shop
it's
at Trader Joe's.
it's literally on the corner of the highway, and I'm like 2 streetlights down.
I gotcha. I gotcha. Oh my goodness. Yeah, there's distance definitely makes a barrier. Just like time to getting in makes a barrier. And definitely I think that's just going back to your website. It's a super catchy graphic. So high five on that. Because I was like, yep, it represents very well the feeling that most patients have and that they get rid of when they join a TPC practice. So let me ask you, in regards to your experience, especially when we talked about relationship building and going into people's homes, had you ever given a thought to doing a home-based DPC with telemedicine before opening a physical location?
I did, and I think if I were to had start from scratch, that's probably what I would have done for sure. But having already 66 patients ready to go. They expected a physical location. They were used to that. And I wanted it for myself too. I wanted my own space that was outside of my own house. And that was important for me. And I was able to do it because I have financial support from my husband. And then I had my side gig of still teaching. So I had the means to do it. So that I would have totally done that, the home visits and telestuff if I was doing it all over fresh.
Now, how about your practice now compared to what it was at the academic and clinical center that you were at Sam Houston, where you hadn't seen a kid in over a year and a half? How is your practice population now that you're going to be in your second year soon?
It's all families. It's young families. I think I get like a couple newborns a month, it seems like sometimes. So that's the thing that I love taking care of is families. One of the things that I do is I make it where there's nobody else here and the whole family can come and they have the whole clinic to themselves and they absolutely love it.
In terms of the time that you have with your practice, you can clearly offer OMM if you need to. On your website, you highlight how it's not just all about the book Western medicine that we learned in medical school. So can you tell us how your practice is different, especially because of the time that you have in this model of DPC, to be able to talk about different options with your patients?
Yeah. So, I mean, obviously, if you look at my logo, that sets me apart from a lot of other practices. Being a Christian myself and just wanting to personally interact with I want a Christian doctor for myself. I want a Christian dentist for myself. So our community here, nobody was defining themselves in that way. So I'm the first one to do that in this area. I wanted to just put my Batman signal up and be like, you can come here. This is a physician that shares your beliefs. But that being said, I mean, I don't put that on patients. If there's an opportunity to pray for somebody or whatever they need, I discern when to do that. It's not like, oh, every patient gets this talk so, I mean, that has been one thing. I can't tell you how many patients are like, we're just so happy we found a Christian provider who shares our beliefs, who's open to our beliefs, not only just religiously, but like how we're raising our kids. And I just make it an area of no judgment. I have patients who vaccinate and I have patients who don't vaccinate. And to me personally, that's not why I became a physician to pick a side and push that. My purpose is to support the patients the best that I can with where they're at and what their goals are. As long as they're safe, that's all that matters.
You still have some involvement at Sam Houston, which I think is super smart. Always think about how you can diversify income, because I started this podcast because I was being fired. And I didn't think as a physician you could be fired. I mean, for sure, if you were like really bad at medicine, but diversification is so important. Just putting that out there. But you still, like you said in the beginning, you really loved the ability to teach, and you loved when you got to teach, the opportunities to teach. You still take on medical students. So where you have exposure to students and being able to share your experience with them as they're going down their own medical journeys, I wanted to ask about how you talk with these medical students and residents about what you're doing and your journey, and how they respond back to you in terms of, like you said, in your second year, you're like, this is a little intimidating. But how do they respond now when you tell them about your journey and what you're doing?
Yeah, it's been fun. A lot of them don't know what DPC is, or few of them do, so they can't wait to talk to me. But so there's always the curiosity, but I always find a way to bring patient scenarios up into the conversation when teaching them, because you always try to make it relatable so something anchors and they remember something. And so I always tell them an interesting situation in my clinic. They're like, wait, you see those patients? You're a family doc? You see those patients? I'm like, yeah, I do. And so then they're like, well, what else do you do? And I'm like, well, come rotate with me. I'd be happy to have you. And so, and I'm one of the younger faculty, so I'm sometimes more approachable. They ask about your experiences and stuff. And so there's always, well, I don't know, family medicine or peds. And so you get to have that conversation with them, why they should do family, or why not, what their goals are. But I get to not only interacting with the students, I interact with other community faculty as well. I know a physiatrist now who's a TBI specialist. I know a sports med doctor. So even those relationships have become vital where I can just text my sports med doc and be like, hey, I need a patient who needs an ultrasound on their Achilles. Can you fit them in? But yeah, and then all the student interactions is great. Educating them on primary care. And then also, what I found talking to them is I was like, hey, do y'all get any education on direct primary care? And they're like, well, we have this business of medicine online module. I'm like, okay, I need to find a student that's done that. And of course, I get access to it. And I'm like, there's nothing about DPC on this thing. So I was like, okay, I know what I need to do. And so I'm going to be working on that with them. But I always have students rotating with me, which helps because I give them jobs. Like, I don't have a nurse, I don't have a receptionist. So like I'm doing it all. And so I'm going to expect them to help me do it all because I think it's really important for them to get a grasp of all the jobs of running a clinic. I started from a nursing assistant to a nurse, and knowing all the details of those jobs has done nothing but serve me as a physician. So yeah, so I get to have them rotate, and that's also additional. I get a stipend for it as well, so it's nice. So I've told my patients I will teach. I tell them, I remind them all the time, I will teach until I can't teach no more. I am purposely capping my patients to 250 just so I can continue to teach because the money is good. It's nice to have the ability to step away from my practice. And all my patients know, they'll text me, you're probably teaching right now. Get back to me later. And it's kind of, I get a little breather from the clinic, and it's just great. Like you said, you never know what's going to happen. I'm like, I know I'm going to be successful, but you just never know what's going to happen. And at any moment I can pull the other foot out of the one world and put 2 feet in and go hard fully either direction. Based on my current pricing that I have now, if I were to stop teaching, I would have to take on 64 individual patients or 27 families to make up for that income.
Just incredible. And definitely another call to action to figure out how to diversify your income, especially if you're able to, physically able to, mentally able to, your family status, your whatever is allowing you to do things. Like I can't envision being an 8 to 5 full-time family doctor and like still be there for the kids, just like how you were talking about being at work all the time. And your husband was the person who was like, I can see you still working. So I think it's whatever situation you are in right now, figure out what works for you right now, but also figure out how can you diversify so that you have financial backing going into the future. Now, I want to ask Jamie about your transition from being employed to your own DPC, because there's a lot of questions here, given that a lot of practices like ours are open. People are like, I don't want to open my own. I want to join on. In terms of your agreement, you already mentioned that you had no non-compete, which is great. But in terms of your position, were you considered a 1099, a W-2? How did that work employment-wise?
Yeah, I was a 1099, so it wasn't a big deal to separate. And given the circumstances between us, I was able to take my patients with me, which is not always a possibility. In fact, if I was not able to take my patients with me, I was prepared to just go back to academics for a while and save up money and then start my practice again. But luckily that wasn't the situation, and I was able to tell my patients where I was going and give them a letter and do all of that.
It's interesting because I've talked to some DPCs who have spoken about how they've hired people, and some have specifically said, if I brought on another physician to my practice, why would I put a non-compete? Because I think that's dirty. I think it's dirty what non-competes have done to physicians in general. Why would I do that? And it's something to consider if somebody out there is listening and they're like, I haven't even addressed that. Would I or would I not? And these are things to think about. You shared how it was just so not even allowing you to see families and all of the stuff that you described from your academic clinical practice that pushed you into DPC. What was it that was like, hey, you know what? I actually think I want to do this on my own and have my very own clinic and build it from the ground up.
Yeah, There was a lot of factors. The clinic I was working with, it was just one other provider. We split the overhead and she got 10% of everything I killed. And then I also was charged rent. And so it was, I feel after a while, I felt like this was too much, especially covering for multiple vacations and maternity leaves and things. And I wasn't quite getting that back, but I also couldn't take the time because I was still teaching and trying to grow my side of the practice. So I felt like I was getting burnt on multiple bridges there, and I was paying for staff that I wasn't really using. And so it just got to a point with those were all the business this side of things, and then there were personal things, and it just became very clear that I could no longer afford building my practice on somebody else's foundation. And so that ultimately is what made me decide to start my own.
And let me ask you here, just clearly you've opened your own practice and it's doing super well. But let me ask you for those people who are like, I wonder how it could have been better. If you could give feedback to people who are like, you are at the point in the road where it's like the culture and how you maintain it is so important. So pay attention to these things or you're going to lose your doctor. What would you say to those people in general who are like just going, doing things one way and are open to change, but they haven't thought about the changes that they could make, things that they could stop doing to promote a culture that is, like you said, like not making one feel like that they're just like being taken advantage of?
So yeah, so just from this experience, if you're wanting to have the benefits of bringing on somebody else, you have to also go with the not so fun things and being more flexible to that person. Like for us, it was a 2-story clinic, so there were 3 rooms on the bottom, and one of them was her office. And I used the upstairs space as my little area where I would do OMM and my office things. But it got to a point where this would make more sense to turn the office into a room, and everybody just shares the office space upstairs like a communal space. The nurses were for it, and it would have just made more workflow sense. And because 2 doctors starting to have almost 2 full panels with just 2 rooms, it was ridiculous. So patients would get mad, nurses would get mad. Heaven forbid you went a little bit over from the other person having to wait. So you have to be flexible. That was just one of the inflexibilities that I faced. Also, just when you're technically the boss, what you say needs to be what you do. And then people will only take that for so long, and then you start to lose trust. Those would probably be the 2 biggest things that come to mind.
I think it's super helpful and general enough also that people can look at their own practices and just examine their own practices under the spotlight of those words. So I think that's super helpful. As you talk about like this space usage situation and how the nurses would have loved it, the patients would have loved it. And even in your previous practice in academia and your academia/clinical practice, how you were treated, how patients were treated throughout all of those experiences, customer service is a really big thing for you. And so with you having so much customer service experience in the ICU, in doing wound care, doing home health, clearly being a physician and doing primary care, customer service is a very big thing. How did you envision building your customer experience at your DPC? And was it any different than what you had been trying to do at previous practices?
Yeah, so I knew that I just wanted it to just be me. I know that my patients love that they can just text and they know it's me, like they call and they're like, "Oh, you're the doctor? Oh, wow, I've never gotten straight to the doctor." I just know that that's what they want. The patients that I'm trying to get, they're joining me because they're just as frustrated with the healthcare system as I am, and they're willing to pay my prices to have access to me. And so I literally do everything. I mean, I'd rather do it. I'd rather take the blood pressure than hope that the new nurse I just hired is doing it right. I know how to freaking do it. I can do it. I'll do it. And so I'm going to do that. And I told my patients this, I will be the only one for as long as I can. And probably until I myself hire somebody else, and then maybe we can split an MA or something. But that's what I'm selling. I'm selling, you get me and nothing but me.
Totally. And I think that just reinforces again why DPC can open in any environment. DPC can open whether you're known in a community or not. DPC patients are in this for their doctors. Thank you so much, Dr. Eller, for sharing your story today.
Thank you so much for having me, and thank you for doing this. This podcast was a huge inspiration when I made the quick decision to start my own practice. I started listening to every single episode, and it was so encouraging. So thank you.
Thank you for joining us for another episode of My DPC Story, highlighting the physician experience in the world of direct primary care. I hope you found today's conversation insightful and inspiring. If you want to dive deeper into the direct primary care movement, consider joining our My DPC Story Patreon community. Here, you'll have access to exclusive content, including more interview topics and much more. Don't forget to subscribe to My DPC Story on your podcast feed and follow us on social media as well. If you're able, I'd greatly appreciate if you could leave us a review. It helps others to find the podcast. Until next time, stay informed, stay healthy, and keep advocating for DPC. Read more about DPC news on the daily at dpcnews.com. Until next week, this is Marielle Conception.